Thank you so much, Yolande. I also want just to acknowledge that we have William Lambers, who just joined in, who's an author, journalist, historian, who's written about the crisis in Yemen and been supportive of Action Corps' work just in your writing and acknowledging the work in national publications. So thank you. I have some bad news on this day of celebration, which is the bad news is that right now, more than twice as many people are experiencing acute malnutrition than in 2019. More than double the number of people. And early this morning, I was just Googling acute malnutrition to try to get a better understanding what this means. And some of the words that came up were pretty disturbing, like starvation, wasting, rapid weight loss from disease or lack of food. So when we face this sort of situation, I think about, well, what can we do? And I know that I have many times felt powerless, but in organizing together, we can address the root causes of hunger. And this is how we happen to take on the work to get the United States to stop participating in the war in Yemen, which has caused one of the largest hunger crises on the planet. It's why we have taken on the work for a global economic relief for the world's most vulnerable countries facing climate disasters, facing violent conflict, facing the impact of violent conflict. The war in Ukraine has shot up prices for wheat around the world and made it really hard for people to get the food that they need. We look at the 3 C's of climate change, of conflict that's violent, and of COVID, and how this has driven hunger around the world. When I learned about special drawing rights, the International Monetary Fund's virtual currency, it's a resource that they can generate and release to the world's countries all at once, just like that. I was a little puzzled about this at first, but the more that I learned, the more I understood that this was a really important part of the solution. And it's why Action Corps has brought together over 100 organizations in signing letters to Congress, to the administration. And most recently, we helped lead a letter, we supported a letter from 140 organizations, including some of yours, to the International Monetary Fund. The International Chamber of Commerce, we asked to get on this letter, and they joined in, the AFL-CIO joined in, and various religious organizations. Oxfam joined this letter. And this letter called for another release of these emergency financial resources called special drawing rights. We'll share a few numbers in a moment about some of our work. But to get to what this actually means on a personal level, during the pandemic, I remember hearing stories about people in Afghanistan having to choose between having food on the table or retaining their body intact. People selling body parts in order to have food to put on their table. Hearing about stories in Yemen of people being sold into marriage at a very young age because their families so desperately needed the funds. So part of my hope for the work that Action Corps does and the work that we all do together is that people be able to make easier choices, that the choices that people face be easier. We have the power to change the conditions that have caused so many people to be facing hunger. We have that power. And being in the United States, and I know some of you are joining from Grenada, from Albania, from other countries, and so glad to have you here with us today. But I know that in the United States is one of the wealthiest, largest economies and countries in the world. We have an incredible opportunity to drive policy and change policy that will make a difference for people around the world. I want to share a few slides with you that give a sense about our work and appreciate the support from all of you. I want to thank the sponsors of this event. If you want to, there we go, the sponsors of this celebration today. This is a picture of Neda, one of our first staff people who I met summer before last in California, and just amazing to connect with somebody who had so much passion and determination and community. And within like a few days of Neda and my meeting at a little celebration, she had organized a rally at the office of important congressperson in California. We showed up, and that led to a meeting with that member of Congress in which we were able to express the importance of support for a resolution to stop U.S. participation in the war in Yemen. Go to the next slide, Ellie. I want to thank all of the individuals and organizations for your support. Particularly, we have the Oxfam and your Oxfam's generous support, Greg and Heather Hardy, and finally Nabil with his leadership donation for this event. Nabil is the treasurer of our board. Appreciate the Center for Economic and Policy Research, CEPR, who has done a lot of the writing that has supported the work for an issuance of special drawing rights, and for Dr. Aisha Juman, who is the founder of the Yemen Relief and Reconstruction Foundation. Go to the next slide. So here's a video that was made by Inside Arabia, which is an independent media organization. I will note that there are a couple of ads for other videos at the end, which is not from Action Corps, but this is something that Inside Arabia has created last December.
Since the beginning of the Yemeni civil war, at least 230,000 civilians have died. 16 million Yemenis are on the brink of starvation. 2.3 million children under the age of 5 are suffering from malnutrition. More than 1,100 children die per day. That's one every 75 seconds. Yet the United States continues to enable the war, specifically the Saudi UAE-led coalition and its blockade of Yemeni ports and airports. Instead of the United States using its leverage with Saudi Arabia to lift the blockade, U.S. contractors are providing maintenance support for Saudi fighter jets. And in late 2021, President Biden announced a $650 million weapons sale to Saudi Arabia, which will help enforce the blockade. The United States has the power to stop the world's worst man-made humanitarian crisis, and Action Corps is playing a significant role in working with other rights activists to push Congress to withdraw the U.S. from the war. The grassroots initiative has effectively influenced powerful members of Congress to take a position on Yemen, and in several cases, get them to move significantly. In 2018, Action Corps demonstrated for 6 hours in front of New York Congressman Gerald Nadler's Manhattan office, using protest signs, buses, trucks, and billboards from independent media organization Inside Arabia's 2018 Save Yemen campaign. The next day, Representative Nadler co-sponsored and publicly supported a Yemen War Powers resolution. On January 25, 2021, Action Corps brought together several different rights organizations to facilitate the initiative World Says No to War on Yemen Global Day of Action, in which tens of thousands of people from all over the world participated. Action Corps is now demanding the passage of a War Powers resolution to end U.S. participation in the war on Yemen, and to pressure Saudi Arabia to end its blockade. For Action Corps, Yemeni leadership, and other rights activists to continue building the movement to stop the blockade of Yemen, we need your help. By supporting Action Corps, you would help raise the voices of people around the world. Your gift will help increase Action Corps' capacity to advance U.S. policies in solidarity with people facing mass atrocities worldwide. Your generosity will help Action Corps support its organizers and ambassadors in 20 states, double the number of states where Action Corps has an on-the-ground presence, and increase their influence with members of Congress. We have the power to stop the blockade. We have the power to end the war. Please donate to Action Corps today and join the movement.
Thank you. Feel free to put in the chat any responses that you have, interested in your reactions to what you hear and see and hear. Ellie, I think we have a few other slides that we wanted to share. While this is coming up, I'll just share that one of my hopes is that we can actually have a presence on the ground in all 50 states. It would end eventually, perhaps beyond. We are powerful because we are able to show up at key moments in key places and connect with powerful members of Congress. All the members of Congress actually aren't equal when it comes to issues of foreign policy. The chairpeople of foreign policy committees, the chairpeople of the armed service committees, they have particular power, but sometimes it's the appropriations committee chair. And we don't have organizers in Alabama or in Kansas or in a number of states where it would be really useful for us to be able to say, hey, we have person on the ground. So that's something we'll be working on in the coming days, and would welcome support in getting out the word that we're looking for folks around the country who want to be an on the ground presence with us. So next slide. Just a few numbers about us. We had 90 meetings and phone calls that were scheduled with members of Congress and their staff in 5 months of 2021. We organized meetings with a bunch of Sisters of Mercy folks, with other organizations, connecting constituents with their members of Congress to talk about the need for global COVID response from the International Monetary Fund, also talking about Burma, human rights in Burma and the genocide there and the war in Yemen. We brought together 83 organizations this past March for a Yemen war protest on the month, the 7-year anniversary of U.S. participation in the war. With other organizations and members of Congress, we got over 100 co-sponsors, Republicans and Democrats, on the House Yemen War Powers Resolution to stop U.S. participation in the war. And Action Corps played a key role in getting the commitment from Senator Sanders and Senator Leahy in introducing the Yemen War Powers Resolution in the Senate with Senator Warren. We had a bunch of action-Rs. I love this term. We have a lot of webinars, but there were action-Rs where people took action, like making calls to congressional offices. 360 congressional offices were called with our allies. And in August of 2021, the International Monetary Fund released $650 billion of emergency financial resources called special drawing rights to 190 countries. That's 3 times as large as the next largest issuance of these resources in history. And all of you who have been part of Action Corps, who donated, who written letters to the editor, who met with members of Congress, you played a pivotal role in that happening. The managing director of the IMF said that this would never have happened without civil society support. And Action Corps has led that charge in the United States. Just the other day, 140 organizations signed a letter to the IMF saying that we need more, and we helped recruit those organizations. Action Corps got a shout out in the Reuters article about this that came out last week. All right, next slide. And you might be wondering, okay, what supports this good work? Well, last year, we had 1,500 volunteer hours were put in from Action Corps volunteers. We have 175,000 people on our email list who reach out to their members of Congress when we ask them to, who are able to support from afar. We received $26,000 in non-foundation support in our last fiscal year. That means like donors like you, like other organizations. And we had a total of $134,000 in revenue last year. We would love to see that amount of non-foundation support increase so that we have the sort of independence and the real responsiveness to our members and the folks that we are working with on the ground. The next slide. These are just a few pictures from our work from this past year. All right, that's great.